Next.
Thank you. Next matter, Mr. President, there are two matters, change of zone number 1979 and conditional use number 2359, both on behalf of J.G. Townsend Jr. and Company, and I'm sure that they will be a simultaneous hearing. Mr. Whitehouse.
That's correct. I'll present them together. The first is change of zone number 1979, filed on behalf of J.G. Townsend Jr. and Company. This is an ordinance to amend the comprehensive zoning map of Sussex County from an AR1 agricultural residential district to an MR medium residential district for a certain parcel of land lying and being in Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, containing 25.56 acres more or less. The property is lying on the east side of Kings Highway, which is Rec 9, and Gills Neck Road, which is Sussex County Rec 267, at the intersection of Kings Highway and Gills Neck Road. The 911 address is 16673 Kings Highway, Lewis, and the tax parcel ID is District 335, Map 12, Parcel 3.00. Submitted into the record for this change of zone application, we have a copy of the Del Service Level Evaluation Response, a copy of the applicant's conceptual site plan, copies of the applicant's exhibits, a copy of the staff analysis, a copy of a letter received from the Sussex County Engineering Department, Utility Planning Division, a copy of the applicant's environmental assessment, and a copy of the applicant's public facility evaluation report. And I would note we've received 3 written responses for the change of zone application. The next item is conditional use number 2359, also filed on behalf of J.G. Townsend Jr. and Company. This is an ordinance to grant a conditional use of land in an MR medium residential district for multifamily, 102 units, to be located on a certain parcel of land lying and being in Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, containing 25.56 acres more or less. The property is located on the same parcel and a tax parcel, District 335, Map 12, Parcel 3.00, and staff would note a portion of that parcel. Submitted into the record for the conditional use application, we have a copy of the Del Service Level Evaluation Response, a copy of the applicant's conceptual site plan, a copy of the applicant's exhibits, a copy of the staff analysis, a copy of a letter received from the Sussex County Engineering Department, Utility Planning Division, a copy of the environmental assessment, a copy of the public facility evaluation report, and a copy of the applicant's wellhead protection area responses. We also have received 19 written comments into the record. Both applications were subject to public hearings before the Planning and Zoning Commission at its meeting of May 25th of this year, and at its meeting of June 20th of this year, the Commission recommended approval of change of zone number 1979 for the 8 reasons as outlined within the motion, and the Commission recommended approval of application CU 2359 for the 8 reasons stated and subject to the 17 recommended conditions as outlined within the motion. And Mr. President, your paperless packet includes both of those motions along with the minutes of both of those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from council? If not, Mr. Hutt.
Good afternoon, members of council.
Mr. Hutt.
For the record, my name is David Hutt, a local attorney here in Georgetown with the law firm of Morris James. This afternoon, I am representing both the owner of the property, J.G. Townsend Jr. and Company, as well as the applicant, Jack Lingo Asset Management. With me this afternoon to assist as necessary with this presentation on behalf of the owner of the property, J.G. Townsend and Company, Mr. Townsend. Paul Townsend is near the rear of the room. On behalf of Jack Lingo Asset Management, sitting in the second row, is Nick Hammonds. The project engineers for this proposed community are Davis, Bone, and Friedel, and Cliff Mumford was sitting next to me on the front row. And then sitting in the second row is Stephen Cahill, a professional geologist with Verdanis, who prepared the environmental assessment report that Mr. Whitehouse just referenced a moment ago as one of the exhibits. Thank you for agreeing to consolidate the presentation of these applications this afternoon, so everything only has to be said once. If you were to have printed the booklet for this project, it would have consumed a lot of paper. Hopefully most people use the online version. But I point that out to demonstrate that this is not something that was entered into lightly by the applicant. There was a great deal of time and studying and preparation that went into laying out and developing this site plan and throughout not only just this project, but as you'll hear, throughout a number of projects that exist along Gills Neck Road. I wanted to begin with a brief history of the overview of this area, then talk about the zoning maps and state strategies maps that apply to this property, and then ask Mr. Mumford if he would review the design site plan and some of the technical details of the site plan. And after he's done, I will return and comment on the project's compliance with the comprehensive plan, the zoning code, as well as its consistency with the character of this area of Sussex County. And in particular, I will be commenting on how it fits into the scheme of development that has developed over the last several decades, starting with the area along Kings Highway, which, as you can see, runs from the top to bottom of the screen on the images around the room, and then extends from that Kings Highway along Gill's Neck all the way over to the canal itself, the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal, which appears, it does not appear on this image, but is much further over. Are these the slides, Mr. Whitehouse?
I may have loaded the exhibit, but give me 2 seconds. On presentation booklets. I believe that's the one from May 15th.
He's looking for that, not me.
On that?
It was the slides that we used at the Planning and Zoning.
I believe that's the one. It's the same files I used from the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Yeah. We have a zip drive with it. Can I plug this?
Sure, yeah, go ahead. That's it. Thanks.
Can I take this one out?
There should be another slot right above it. So you just. That's it. There we go. Sorry, Mr. President.
That's fine.
As I was mentioning, one of the themes of this presentation is one of the advantages that this area of Sussex County has had by being under the same ownership for a very long period of time. And that is, you can have a consistency of development and an integration of those developments along this area. And that'll be one of the themes throughout this afternoon's presentation. But in general, and certainly Mr. Whitehouse is the expert on these matters for the county, but sound land use planning puts the most activity closer to your major roadways. And as you move away from those roadways, of course, the activity or density decreases. And of course, when you look at the aerial imagery that's on the screens around the room, the county identifies this portion of Route 9 or Kings Highway as a major arterial. DelDOT refers to it as a principal arterial. But in either event, under any zoning or under any classification, the road is certainly a major highway. And that's why it's appropriate for there to be the more active or intense uses situated along Kings Highway. And then, of course, as you lead away from Kings Highway on Gill's Neck Road towards the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal, which you can see right in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, actually right there is a portion of the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal. The intensity should go down under sound land use principles. And as I was mentioning, J.G. Townsend Jr. Company has owned all of those lands and has had a consistent theme of development that applied that sound land use principle. And you'll hear about how that helps with things like stormwater management. It helps with interconnectivity. And frankly, the county has recently introduced an ordinance called hoping to have a master plan ordinance in the future when you have that type of singular block of land or pieces of land that people can put together and have that type of planning and use for. While the location of the property certainly probably needs no introduction, the image on the screen does show the site and the surrounding area. The property that we're talking about here this afternoon begins about 500 feet east of Kings Highway, and right where the cursor is located. And between Kings Highway and this site is an area zoned B1, which is intended to be the future Village Center commercial area. The total property that you see on the screens, it's outlined in yellow, consists of a tax parcel that's a little over 65 acres. Today's application relates to this area, and we'll certainly have better images of that as the presentation moves forward. But the area where the cursor is located is a little more than 25.5 acres. Certainly two of the reasons why the site probably needs no introduction is because it is one of the roadways into the city of Lewis that's well traveled by most Sussex counties and many people who visit Sussex County. In addition, of course, the Cape and Lopin High School campus is on the opposite corner from this property. A few other features along Kings Highway. If you were to come off of Route 1 headed north, you begin with Crooked Hammock, and then there would be the future Townsend Village Center. At the corner of the intersection of Gills Neck Road and Kings Highway is the Cape and Lopin Medical Center. Just recently, Council rezoned the parcel adjacent to that to a commercial use, and that'll be another office building similar to the Cape and Lopin Medical Center. And as you travel a little further, of course, you have Lane Builders, a local builder, their office, and then the Big Oyster Brewery, and then essentially you're in the city of Lewis at that point. If you switch sides of Kings Highway and move to the other side of the street, there's currently work being undertaken on the opposite side of the street for Lewis Medical Campus, which is now known as the Lodge and Dutchman's Harvest. As you travel towards the site, there's the Jack Lingo Realtor office. Then there's the Cape and Lopin High School campus that we just talked about. And right after the high school campus is Cape and Lopin's administrative offices. And then, of course, you come to Clay Road. Then there's a series of businesses on the opposite side of Kings Highway from this area. And then as you move past, there are some apartment-type uses that we'll talk about in a second. If you were traveling down Gills Neck Road, of course, I mentioned the Cape and Lopin Medical Center, which is on Gills Neck Road, and the future Village Center. The next use would be the Mitchell's Corner residential project, which will involve duplexes. Then there is this site. As you continue down Gills Neck Road, as if you were headed into the city of Lewis, traveling that path, it's referred to as Cadbury here, but of course since then the name's been changed to the Moorings, which is an assisted living facility, but a similar multi-family type use. Across the street is the Governor's Community, and we'll talk about some of the concerns that many of those individuals have had. Those are the letters and comments that are referenced in the file, and I believe, frankly, most of the people that are sitting behind me are from the Governor's Community. And then as you continue on Gills Neck Road, you have the Senator's Community, the Hawkside Community. Across the street, of course, is Breakwater, and then Wolf Run, Wolf Point, Admiral's Chase, again, all residential uses as you head in towards the city of Lewis as you go along that roadway. With that quick orientation to the overall area, I did want to talk briefly before Mr. Mumford speaks about the designation of this property on the state strategies maps. On this map, the property and the project are shown outlined in blue. This, of course, is the 2020 state strategies map. Rather than try to repeat what the Office of State Planning or summarize what the Office of State Planning Coordination said, I thought it would just be best to read it. They had a sentence where they described this project. They noted that this project is located in investment level 1 according to the strategies for state policies and spending. Investment level 1 reflects areas that are already developed in an urban or suburban fashion, where infrastructure is existing or readily available, and where future redevelopment or infill projects are expected and encouraged by state policy. In short, this is where the state expects and anticipates growth to occur. And as you can see, the color that's underneath this outline is red or level 1. Similarly, As you know, the county in the 2018 comprehensive plan adopted a 2045 future land use map. On the future land use map, as you can see, the property again is outlined in blue. The color that's underneath that is a yellow color, which is, as you know, is the county's coastal area, one of the county's 7 growth areas. And as you can see, everything that is shown on this portion of the county's future land use map is either yellow, red, or a tan or brown color. And so this is a growth area for Sussex County, a very active area of the county. The yellow areas are, of course, as I just mentioned, the coastal area, the red areas being commercial areas, and then the tan or brown being within the municipal limits of the city of Lewis. The last map that I wanted to review quickly before Mr. Mumford speaks is the county zoning map. As you can see, the parcel again is outlined in blue. The pinkish in color area situated at the corner of Gills Neck Road and Kings Highway is, of course, the B1 portion of the site where the future Townsend Village Center would be located. And you can see the most recent rezoning to C2 on the Mitchell's Corner property. And you can, of course, also see the other items or properties that are yellow in color, which are medium density residential, which is this afternoon's application. In total of that 65, a little more than 65 acre site, a little more than 11.5 acres are comprised within this B1 portion of the site. This afternoon's application is for approximately 25.5 acres, and then the unused balance of the site, this portion down here, at this point would be almost 28 acres. As indicated when Mr. Whitehouse introduced the application, there are 2 applications in front of council this afternoon. The first is to change the zoning designation on the zoning map for these 25.5 acres from AR1 to MR. And the second application seeks council to approve a conditional use application to allow a multifamily project constructed on the property consisting of 102 cottage-style multifamily units, which will be detailed in a moment for you. With that quick orientation to this area, the zoning and the future land use map, I'm going to ask Mr. Mumford to review some of the technical design requirements at this time.
Good afternoon, members of council and planning and zoning staff. My name is Cliff Mumford. I'm a civil engineer with the firm Davis, Bowen & Friedel out of the Milford office at 1 Park Avenue, Milford. So I'll begin by looking at the existing conditions map from a 1992 aerial photo. You can see along Gills Neck Road, it was basically undeveloped with Wolf Point and Wolf Run starting development in the east side of the screen there. And moving to the 2022 recent aerial map, you can see the build out that's moved from the east to the west with some infill of Admiral's Chase, this little townhouse infill project here. And it's just filled in as you make your way west to our project, the Village Center, Cottages, and Commercial. So as mentioned by Mr. Hutt, the project is located on the south side of Gills Neck Road and bounded by the Village Center Commercial project to the west. Stokely Boulevard to the south, which will be the future interconnection road that is planned as part of Governor's and what is stubbed currently at the property line. It's a boulevard section with lanes in each direction separated by a grass median. Further to the west of the Village Center Commercial is Kings Highway, which is classified as a principal arterial per the DelDOT functional classification map. And it's identified as a major arterial roadway per number 7 of the definition found in Chapter 115 of the County Code. Gills Neck Road is classified as a local road per DelDOT functional classification map. As noted earlier, the proposed cottages continue the development of the Gills Neck Road corridor as first contemplated decades ago with the construction of larger lot communities to the east and smaller and more dense housing options like Breakwater, Senators, Governors and the proposed Village Center cottages, ultimately leading to the Village Center. The Village Center retail section will provide shopping options to the corridor in the form of a 75,000 square foot neighborhood center. Other developments on Gills Neck include Admiral's Chase, the Moorings, and Mitchell's Corner. The Village Center was planned for when Governors was designed to incorporate shared infrastructure and the alignment of Stokely Boulevard from its current terminus within Governors to Clay Road, which is a signalized intersection. The Village Center commercial, which is separately approved, and the cottages were planned together to develop pedestrian and vehicular interconnectivity, much to the delight of Mrs. Kim Hoy Stevenson. The commercial development being an important component to reduce trips to Route 1 for shopping. Before going further into the site layout, I'd like to read the statement of design intent from the architects of Union Studio to highlight the unique design for this project. The Village Center Cottages is laid out as a neighborhood of 102 cottage-scale homes. It seeks to encourage community interaction and provide a walkable neighborhood. The homes have been sited to help create a series of pedestrian-focused neighborhoods linked by walkways that include common greens and planted courtyards. Each of the neighborhoods within the plan is comprised of 10 to 16 homes. So you see there's little groupings of homes around open courtyards. In this way, the 102 cottages experience more as a collection of smaller pocket neighborhoods where neighbors know one another. Parking is accessed from discrete rear lanes here and is carefully corralled. Walkways link up to lead from one neighborhood to another, and all of them lead to the community building in the center and the retail Village Center commercial project to the west. Homes will range from 1 to 3 bedrooms and expect to range from 1,000 square feet to 1,500 square feet. They will have small side or rear yard patio, as well as front porch looking out to a common green or pedestrian right-of-way. The individual units are arranged to nest with one another, the floor plans being arranged so that living spaces of one unit aren't adjacent or visible from the living spaces of another. Simple roof forms and tight, well-insulated building envelopes will allow the future possibility of solar panels and very low net energy usage. Aesthetically, the neighborhood would draw from coastal styles prevalent in the mid-Atlantic states, with simple traditional forms clad in clapboard, shingle, and painted trim. And here's a sample of kind of the idea of what's intended for this. So while this project is technically a multifamily project, we felt that parking should be based on the single-family requirement of 2 spaces per unit in lieu of the multifamily requirement, which is 2 spaces per unit with a reduction after the first 50 units. Additionally, the cottages will not have more than 3 bedrooms, and therefore the extra space requirement would not apply. The project is required to have 204 spaces based on the 2 spaces per unit, and we are providing 240 spaces. Proposed density based on the project area is 3.99 units per acre. The total impervious area, including buildings, streets, sidewalks, is 9.67 acres, or 38% of the project area. A minimum 2,000 square foot clubhouse with a minimum 1,000 square foot pool water service area is planned for the middle of the project. Streets A and C and Stokely Boulevard, which this is Street C, and Stokely Boulevard here, and Street A connects Village Center Retail to the Gills Neck entrance, will be designed to Sussex County standards. The parking lanes are designed to be narrow, 20 feet wide, and provide off-street parking for each block and not under the jurisdiction of Sussex County. Stormwater management will be provided via the existing ponds constructed by the developer of Governors. The shared maintenance agreement for these ponds can be found in Exhibit 9. The ponds were designed to accommodate runoff from the existing Governors as well as the Village Center commercial and cottages.
Mr. President, can I interrupt you 1 second? I have some questions on specific items relating to traffic, entrances, storm ponds. Should I interrupt Cliff and hit those as he's discussing them, or wait till the end? I don't know if you want to come back, or is it easier for you if we hit them while you're on topic?
We can just wait till the end. That way, if you had other questions, we could get them at once. All right, the shared stormwater agreement is written such that Governors is 100% responsible for pond maintenance until the first building permit is issued within the commercial center or the cottages, at which time the Village Center landowners will be responsible for 72% of all maintenance costs of the shared ponds. We're requesting a waiver from providing a forested buffer between Governors and the cottages because the property line bisects the ponds and there is sufficient separation between the projects. That would be around where the shared ponds are in this area, but there will be landscaping through here. A similar waiver was provided for Governors. Governors and the cottages are separated by 2 large stormwater ponds that run along the property boundary. The closest cottage is 70 feet to the property line in this area, and 130 foot to the nearest townhouse unit in Governors. The project area does not contain floodplains as shown on the floodplain map. Get to that one. Project area does not contain wetlands as shown on the environmental map. The green being the wetlands. Furthermore, a site investigation was performed by Ed Linné of Environmental Resource Insights, a division of Davis Bona Friedel, and is noted in Exhibit 11, where the site conditions demonstrate the project is located within uplands and does not include federally listed threatened or endangered species or critical habitats, including habitat for the monarch butterfly. A large portion of the project is located within the wellhead protection area, shown here with the red hatching, with approximately 51% impervious coverage, and therefore must comply with the Chapter 89 of the Sussex County Code. This parcel was previously studied as part of the Village Center commercial rezoning in 2017. The adjacent Mitchell's Corner also completed, I'll be up here, also completed an environmental assessment report for their impact on the wellhead. Both studies found that the proposed projects exceeded their requirements for compliance with the county code. For the Village Center cottages, Verdantis was hired to provide an environmental assessment report, which is the reason the booklet is extra thick, because of that report. Through mergers and acquisitions, Steve Cahill, a professional geologist with Verdantis, is the author of all 3 studies. Furthermore, as part of the application process, we met with the Sussex County engineer to discuss the project's compliance, and the only requirement is compliance with the water climatic budget. The full report and climatic budget can be found in Exhibit 7 and 8. In addition, our office met with the City of Lewis Board of Public Works, and at the time of this presentation, they did not share any objections to the proposed application. The property is located within the Sussex County Unified Sanitary Sewer District and will be served by a gravity sewer system that will discharge to the Governor's Pump Station. The property will be served by Delaware Electric Cooperative for electric, Chesapeake Utilities for natural gas, and water by Tidewater Utilities. All utility companies have provided will and able letter, and that's provided in Exhibits 13 through 16. A service level evaluation was filed with the Planning and Zoning Department, and DelDOT provided a support facilities report found in Exhibit 12 that states the impact for this project is minor, as it may generate between 50 and 200 peak hour trips and between 500 to 2,000 daily trips. We note this project was part of a larger traffic impact study that was first completed in 2007. Furthermore, this project has been included as a committed development in the Mitchell's Corner Traffic Impact Study and the ongoing Village Center Commercial Traffic Operational Analysis, which that study analyzes the two entrances, the one on Kings Highway and the one on Gills Neck. DelDOT currently has a project in design to dualize Kings Highway from Dartmouth Road intersection to the city limits. The configuration of that road could include signals and/or roundabouts and is to be determined. The proposed Cottages entrance plans will tie into the interim improvements that will be completed by Mitchell's Corner. Those improvements include dualizing Kings Highway from the north portion of Cape Henlopen High School from this intersection down to Clay Road. It will modify Gills Neck Road to include dual left turn lanes from Gills Neck Road. So you have two lefts coming out of Gills Neck southbound onto Kings Highway. The Cottages will also tie into the Clay Road, Kings Highway, Stokely Boulevard improvements at the signalized intersection here. That will include auxiliary lanes in all four directions and modifications to the existing signal. All of these improvements are designed with the traffic from the Cottages accounted for in the design. The developer has met with select individuals from the Lewis Byways Committee and is committed to working with the committee on the shared use path, landscaping, fencing, etc., but is awaiting decisions from DelDOT on the final Kings Highway design. Finally, before turning the presentation back to Mr. Hutt, I would like to review certain code compliance items. The project was reviewed by PLUS on December 15, 2021. A copy of their comments and our response can be found in Exhibit 12. The comments were general in nature, and we will comply with all regulatory requirements. Our office prepared an environmental assessment and public facility evaluation report in accordance with Chapter 115, Section 194.3 of the Sussex County Code. The written response can be found in Exhibit 10. The project has analyzed all aspects of the respective items, and all mitigation measures are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Finally, the project is integrated into existing terrain and surrounding landscape. Does not contain wetlands or floodplains, provides buffers to screen objectionable features, prevents pollution of surface and groundwater, provides for safe vehicular and pedestrian movements, mitigates the effect on area roadways and public transportation, and is compatible with other land uses. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now hand it back to Mr. Hutt.
I think Mr. Schaefer has some questions.
Yeah, I do, if I
Sure.
could ask you some questions. In my mind, this is a basic question, but I told a number of the neighbors out there I'd ask it. There's a question about the survey lines and whether they're accurate or not. And I made the statement, and you can confirm this or not, that you used a licensed, certified professional surveyor to survey the site, and those survey lines are as good as can be warranted by anybody. Would that be a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay,
we have
thank you.
professional land surveyors on staff.
Is it anticipated that both entrances be constructed at the time of the Cottages development, the one on Kings Highway and the one on Gills Neck?
Yes.
Yes? How much discussion have you had with DelDOT on the alignment of the proposed roundabouts to the Kings Highway entrance?
A lot of discussion. I had a meeting with them actually on Monday discussing the commercial project. It more affects the commercial project, but it also affects this project because the commercial has frontage along there. So we're working with them to make sure that they can fit their improvements within the right-of-way along Kings Highway and coordinate it with our construction plans for the commercial project.
And would that, you think that proposed roundabout in front of the commercial project would be at the entrance?
Yes. Yeah, we have their CAD file, and we've put it in our drawings and overlaid it and provided it to DelDOT, and we're working on having our projects coordinate with one another. The reality is, though, we'll probably be ahead of them because their process is a little bit more strenuous.
And I understand that DelDOT's requesting of the developer additional right-of-way over and above what's required, to up to, I think, maybe 300 feet. Is that accurate?
It was about 30 additional feet of
Only
right-of-way.
30 additional feet.
But, yeah, that's one of the things we're working with them on.
Does that seem like something you'll be able to accommodate, or is that going to be problematic?
We're working with them on making it so that their needs are met, and taking some of their stormwater from the Kings Highway and taking it to internally into the site. So right now, we're still working through those issues with them.
So in those discussions with DelDOT, the stormwater management out along Kings Highway, do you anticipate that to be closed or open? And does your client have any preference?
Right now, that's one of the things we're working with them on, and we would hope that would be closed because it saves space along the right-of-way.
And would allow for potential additional screening, landscaping?
Correct?
Do you have any level of confidence that you'll be able to get that done with DelDOT? I know that's pure speculation, but.
Yeah, based on our discussions recently, it seems like it's moving that direction.
The Lewis Historic Byways, and by the way, I want to thank you and your client for all the outreach you've done to not only the byways, but the number of the HOAs in the area. I applaud you for that effort, and I applaud them for their efforts to keep an open mind and negotiate with your client. The byways committee, as you know, is actively discussing with you landscaping and buffers along Kings Highway. They've suggested that they would like to have some sort of future input into that, and I wanted to suggest and get your reaction and actually ask Mr. Vincent's opinion on this. As you know, at the Mitchell Forum, there was some question about the stormwater and possible contaminations of a wellhead and so forth and so on. And it was resolved that the developer would work with BPW and kind of have the county engineer act as a moderator to make sure, because the council, once they approved the site, would not have any further control, and it was really a handshake agreement that the county engineer would act as a moderator to make sure that whatever design and improvements were installed, all the parties would agree to, and it worked out very well. Everybody came up with a great solution, and I don't know if that's something that we could, if this were to be approved, if we could consider dealing with the byways concerns and their future input on possible landscape and buffer improvements along Kings Highway, because that's a number of years off, obviously.
Certainly the idea that we did before, with making sure the water was going to be clean and screened, all that kind of stuff, is something we could probably continue right on. I'm not sure, Mr. Moore, involving a separate group down the road, is that something we have the authority to do?
I would question the authority to do that, to have an independent group such as that have some kind of veto power. Instead, we could have conditions written in such a way that would provide some of that same type of screening that they would want, as opposed to have something in the future that they would be able to okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense to do that.
Yeah, and I agree, and I wasn't suggesting they have veto power. I was maybe just, not to be too simplistic, a gentleman's agreement that the parties would work as they did down the street, and it would be a
The
leap.
Byways Committee, it works with DelDOT, and the developer has to coordinate with DelDOT. So the developer never has any control over byways.
Understand.
And DelDOT always funnels you through the Byways Committee. I mean, it happens inherently in their process. And part of the concern here is, of course, that I don't think the final design of Kings Highway is known. Your question about whether it should be an open or closed swale, that's not in my client's control. That's DelDOT's control. And so screening is the same. Those are items that are not within my client's control.
Well, I think the project down the street involved the same individuals, and I think you cooperated very reasonably on that project, and I would assume you do so on this one also.
It actually involves different parties. Certainly,
the Mitchells, I'm sorry.
The level of cooperation will be the same,
Yeah.
but even the plans that the developer had on the Mitchell's Corner site, frankly, were greatly reduced and minimized by DelDOT's actions that it's said so far to date. So that's the concern we have here is the developer can have a great plan, and then DelDOT redesigns something, puts in roundabouts instead of
Sure.
signals.
Yep, absolutely.
And so those are just things that are outside of our control. Certainly, be willing to work with both the Byways Committee and DelDOT, as that's an ongoing discussion, and will be until Kings Highway is dualized, and we're all in a better spot with that.
Understand. The traffic projections that you're basing your calculations off of, and I think I know the answer to this, but just for the public's benefit, those have been projected out by DelDOT with all future development along Kings Highway, including to the east of this site.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. This should be an easy one, I hope, but I gave assurance that I would ask the question in a number of contacts. The entrance sign on Gill's Neck, would you, and Mr. Hutt, I would assume you can probably speak for your client. I would hope that would be in the same design standards as the sign at governors and senators. Is that something that you can take under consideration?
Certainly. I mean, all of the, frankly, I think that the developer's actions speak for themselves. When you drive down Gills Neck Road and look at all the entrances to all the various communities, they set themselves up very nicely.
I do have a couple communities that are not happy with their signage, so I said I would ask that question, and thank you for your answer. Now, this one may be, this is another difficult one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As you know, we had a discussion about a gate last Thursday night at Planning and Zoning, and there's a concern about interconnectivity and shortcut traffic coming through from Kings Highway, blowing through the boulevard and into the governors and senators' neighborhoods. If the council, and I don't speak for the council, I'm just one vote here, if the council thought it was wise to prevent shortcut traffic through the community with the installation of a safety emergency gate, would the developer be opposed to that installation?
The developer does not think that's a prudent land use plan for all those reasons we said at the outset about this being master planned. And frankly, it's not certainly there will be some people who always, Waze or whatever will make that a shortcut for them. But absent a rare circumstance, that's not going to be a great shortcut for someone. And there's first responders that need access. And frankly, when you're planning something that begins at Kings Highway and ends at the canal, the interconnectivity is important for that. And if this was like under the master plan ordinance, for instance, it'd be a requirement of any land use plan that it be master planned and have interconnectivity between those things. And so certainly council can place conditions on a conditional use, and if that condition is placed on the project, they will have to comply. But the developer's position is that would not be prudent land use. And you're stealing some of my thunder, but at the end I was going to indicate that when communities such as Governors is a relatively new community, as is Senators. When those communities are put together under Delaware Code, and Mr. Moore can speak to this, but there's something called a public offering statement, and it references all the documents that new community is being developed pursuant to, and it references all the site plans and such that get approved through the Planning and Zoning Office, and it has certain disclosures. And it was disclosed in all those documents that this interconnection, that Governor Stokely Boulevard would eventually terminate at Clay Road. So it's something that everyone has known about. And again, it's something that's been a point of emphasis, particularly at the Planning Commission, which does obviously the subdivision and site plan review. It's been a point of emphasis for them for at least 5 years, but maybe extending out to 10 years, that there be this interconnectivity. And when you look at the recommendation that the Planning Commission made in this, there was, frankly, it's a rather strong recommendation with respect to the interconnectivity between this. It was condition H, which talks about that the interconnectivity is important and necessary for safe vehicular and pedestrian movement within the developments to provide a means of access to and from them in addition to use Gills Neck Road. It talks about it being part of the master plan. So there's again, that's part of the recommendation. Certainly the developer will comply with whatever council decides, but the developer would not support the elimination of that.
Well, you mentioned the alignment with Clay Road, which reminds me, has DelDOT suggested that they would prefer to have Kings Highway expanded in 4 lanes, which would require additional taking from the frontage of this property?
It's not a suggestion. It's the known outcome. Kings Highway is to be dualized. And so there's frontage along almost all the properties that needs to be taken. In 2009, there was an agreement between DelDOT and this party, and that frontage was already taken. The frontage that you discussed earlier with Mr. Mumford is in addition to that frontage. And so that's the additional frontage that you were discussing and that
So the 30 feet isn't to accommodate the dualization, or just so everybody's clear, that means it'll be a 4-lane road.
Correct.
Sometimes people confuse that and think it's a 2-lane road.
It'll be
I just wanted
4
to
lanes.
Make that clear. But the 30 feet additional is a consideration for additional buffering and landscaping, not for the expansion of the road system,
That was for the expansion.
of the road.
Well, it's all part of the same project.
Okay.
But when DelDOT, again, since 2009, the dualization has been a known project. And it's only recently that DelDOT has decided to push everything onto one side of Kings Highway only and burden all the folks who own property along the eastern side of Kings Highway rather than anything on the western side. That's creating the need to have the additional 30 feet on the properties, the Mitchell's Corner project, as well as this project as well.
Okay, I think I only have one question left. As you know, if council were to approve this and with conditions which would mention buffering and screening, so forth, that would actually then come back to staff, and the staff would negotiate with the applicant on what that screening and buffering looks like, ultimately on the site plan. Do you have any perceptions as to what that screening would look like behind the shopping center? I have some concerns, and I know it's a little bit premature to discuss this, but just maybe conceptually, if you could give us your thoughts on, screening on dumpsters have to go somewhere for refuse coming out of the retail stores. What's the facade of the back of the building going to look like? Are there going to be any enhancements to the facade so it just doesn't look like a 14-foot concrete wall? Do you or your client have any thoughts on that?
Certainly, and I'm going to ask Mr. Hammonds to answer some of those questions in a second, if he would.
Sure.
But because one thing to be careful about here, when you said screening, the 25.5 acres we're here about doesn't have frontage on Kings Highway.
Understand.
So it sounds like you're talking about the screening between the B1 future Townsend Village Center and the proposed units this afternoon? And certainly, again, that's part of the master plan. The developer wouldn't go out and build something that nobody would want to live in these proposed cottages because, you know, they have an ugly barrier along, you know, their western edge is just the backs of those items. But I'll let Mr. Hammonds has been the one most integral into the development of the Village Center commercial plan, and he can speak to what the rear facades and the screening between those two would look like.
Good afternoon, Nick Hammonds with JLAM. While I'll start by saying we haven't fully developed the architecture for the Village Center yet, given some of the challenges that we have, we are pretty far down the road conceptually. And I would tell you, I'll stop short of saying it's two-sided architecture, but say that it's extraordinarily attractive, as I think the entire project is. And that's one of the many reasons we're excited to get the issues that have been mentioned resolved with DelDOT, because we think both the Cottages project as well as Village Center Commercial are going to be like nothing that has been built in the area in a good way. There will also be some landscaping in between the cottages and the commercial area.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
When I began, I spoke about the consistency of these applications with the comprehensive plan, the code, in the area. Covering a few of those items quickly here, the comprehensive plan shows this area, as we indicated before, as being within the coastal area on that map. As you know, the comprehensive plan has table 4.5-2 that talks about the various future land use map categories and then the applicable zoning districts in each of those categories. And the MR, medium density residential district, is an applicable district within the coastal area, as shown on the 2045 future land use map. As you know, there are a number of considerations in the comprehensive plan, the future land use chapter, for when medium density is appropriate. And it's when there is central water and sewer available, when it's near a significant number of commercial uses and employment centers, when it's in keeping with the character of the area, when it's situated along a main road or at or near a main intersection. Certainly this property meets all of those things in spades. There is central water and sewer available. It is near many commercial uses and employment centers, whether you're going into the city of Lewis or it has direct access to Kings Highway, which then leads to Route 1, and all of that can be accessed through that. And it's certainly in keeping with the character of the area and along what the county classifies as a major roadway. With respect to the zoning, the requested zoning for the property, the purpose of the MR district, similarly, is to provide for medium density residential development in areas which are or which are expected to become generally urban in character, but where sanitary sewers and public water supplies may or may not be available at the time of construction. If you recall at the outset, I read a snippet from the Office of State Planning Coordination report. It's exactly what they said, that this is in this level 1 area, this is becoming a more urban area. Again, that's consistent with the comprehensive plan, the state strategies map, and the purpose of the MR zoning district that's requested this afternoon. As you know from prior applications, multifamily uses are conditional uses within the MR zoning district. The best description of that is the second sentence of the conditional use as it's stated in the county code. And what that is, that these uses are generally of a public or semi-public character and are essential and desirable for the general convenience and welfare. But because of the nature of the use, the importance of the relationship to the comprehensive plan and possible impact, not only on neighboring properties but a large section of the county, require the exercise of planning judgment on location and site plan. The county, through a number of applications, has demonstrated that housing is certainly of a public or semi-public character and essential and desirable for the county and, of course, for its residents. Throughout this, what the presentation booklet and materials, the consistency with the county's comprehensive plan for planning purposes is shown. As is indicated again in all of those reports, this MR district is appropriate This is certainly an area that's becoming more urban in character. The area along Kings Highway, as we reviewed at the outset, has a number of residential projects that include multifamily uses, as is proposed here. And in fact, when you move along Gills Neck Road, the same is true. When you travel down Gills Neck Road, the first section of Governors, the part immediately adjacent to this site, is a multifamily townhome use. Across the street, Mitchell's Corner, is a multifamily use. Of course, as you travel down along Gills Neck Road, you come to the Moorings, formerly the Cadbury naming, and that is, of course, a multifamily use. As you travel around, Breakwater has multifamily uses, and down here is Admiral's Chase, which again is another multifamily use, all immediately along the Gills Neck Road corridor. In the correspondence in the file, there is a number of references to concerns about the multifamily use and related to the density of the project. And it was included in the project booklet materials, but one of the things that it showed in those materials is the density of some of the surrounding communities, and certainly that's too difficult to read on the screen, but Dutchman's Harvest, which is in the city of Lewis, approximately where the cursor is located. Again, it's a multifamily use at 17.7 units to the acre. Harbor Town Square has a density of 11.9 units to the acre. Woods Edge in Sussex County at 11 units to the acre. Savannah East Apartments, 11 units to the acre again. Those are all located down here, sort of across the street from this property at the end of Kings Highway. Moving back into the city of Lewis, the Jefferson Apartments have a density of 9.8 units to the acre. The Moorings, which is in Sussex County, and I mentioned a moment ago, is a density of 6.8 units 6.4 units to the acre. The Mitchell's Corner project that was just approved immediately across the street has a density of 6.2 units to the acre. Henlopen Gardens, back in the city of Lewis, has a density of 5.5 units to the acre. If you travel out Kings Highway almost all the way to where Route 1 is, Beach Plum Dunes has a density of 3.2 units to the acre, and Bay Breeze Estates back in the city of Lewis has a density of 3 units to the acre. With respect to the requested zoning designation of MR, as was indicated, what's requested is the same zoning designation as the parcel immediately across the street, the same yellow color if this application is acted upon favorably by council would be here. And of course, it's not just the Mitchell's Corner application, but it's the Moorings, Breakwater, and Admiral's Chase, all along the Gills Neck corridor there. The property immediately to the east of this site, as we've talked about a number of times, is the Governor's Community. The Governor's Community is zoned AR1, but through some of the county's programs, it actually has a density of 3.6 units to the acre. There was additional density that was purchased when it was developed. And that 3.6 units per acre, of course, is consistent with a lot of the densities that I just referenced a moment ago. It's also consistent with the density of the proposed project of 3.99 units to the acre for this site. In some of the comments were particularly, again, from the immediate neighbor, which is the Governor's Community, we're concerned about the density as it approaches them. And I asked the project engineers at Davis, Bone, and Friedel if they would take the nearest 25.5 acres, the exact same size site as this site, and see what the density is within that area. And that is the area that's outlined in red on this parcel here. This is 25, the same acreage as is proposed this afternoon. What that shows is there are 139 units in this area, which is a density of 5.4 units to the acre. So it's actually a little more dense than what's being proposed in the cottages. If we took that 25-acre area and applied it to one of the single-family home portions within the governor's community that also has some of the same features as what is within the Village Center Cottages site. That is this box that's located here. And similar to the Village Center site, you can see that there's a portion of the stormwater ponds, part of the entranceway. So trying to make it a much closer apples-to-apples comparison with respect to the single-family homes. And that single-family home section has a density of 3.6 units to the acre. And so, again, the immediate portion of Governor's is actually more dense than what's being proposed here this afternoon. Again, this exercise was done just to show the consistency of this application with the character of the area. And it's likely why the unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission on both the change of zone and the conditional use application recognized this. In response to the change of zone 1979, the reasons for approval, the Planning Commission found that this rezoning is consistent with other zoning and land uses in the area. Then with respect to conditional use 2359, in reason number 4, the Planning Commission stated, this is also the last parcel of the planned development of Gills Neck Road with an appropriate density transitioning between the adjacent B1 property on one side and the existing multifamily units on the other side. As described at the outset, the design of this was purposefully done through what I'll call sort of an informal master plan approach by a singular owner over many years. As we indicated, good land use indicates you start with Kings Highway with your most intense uses, the B1 uses, and then the intensity of those uses decreases as you get closer to or further away from the major highway, which in this case is Kings Highway. The planning for this began certainly with the Village Center commercial area for this particular parcel. Within the project book materials, there was a copy of the approved preliminary site plan for the development of that commercial area. So that is again, part of this master planning. And I think one of the reasons why the Planning Commission recognized that this is a good transitional use between the B1 area and the townhomes that exist within Governor's. Having that master plan, sort of 20,000 foot view of the site, not only allows for a transition in density, but it also allows for stormwater management systems to be coordinated between all the various communities and uses. And in this case, and again, the document is located within the project book materials, there is a stormwater management agreement for that includes the Governor's development as well as this site, all 65 acres of this site, which of course would include the 25.5 acres we're here talking about. And as you heard from Mr. Mumford, presently, because the only real users of that are the Governor's community, they are responsible for all of the care and maintenance. That shifts as soon as the first building permit is pulled, whether it's in the commercial, Village Center commercial, or for the cottages if they're successful, and then it switches to the 65-acre site where these things are located, being responsible for 78% of all the costs of that. Another benefit of this master plan approach is, of course, the issue that we talked about before, I discussed with Mr. Schaefer, which is the interconnectivity that it allows between the various communities. All of this demonstrates, of course, that these units fit within the character of this area with respect to the traffic plans and concerns. As was noted, DelDOT responded that this would have a minor impact on traffic. And as Mr. Mumford indicated, through all the various traffic impact studies, DelDOT's analysis and preparation for the dualization of Kings Highway, the traffic operations analysis for the Village Center complex, this project has been part of the consideration for that and was included and is included, frankly, in all of their traffic counts and numbers. You heard Mr. Hammonds talk about Jack Lingo Asset Management's excitement to bring not only the cottages that were here this afternoon, but also the commercial area because of the time and attention to detail. And some of those things are set forth in Chapter 8 of the Comprehensive Plan, which, as you know, talks about housing. and that the county allows for multifamily uses through applications like we're here on today. However, the primary housing type has always been just detached single-family homes throughout the county, and states that one of the strategies or goals should be to allow multifamily uses to occur without a conditional use. And while that's just a goal or a strategy, it shows that the comprehensive plan is looking for other housing options to be available to people other than just a single-family home. And while these all are individualized units, it's actually a multifamily application because of that new urbanism construction that you heard about when Mr. Mumford read in the design. And as Mr. Hammonds indicated, this is very unique. There was quite a bit of design ingenuity that went into this to create something that will be very unique to Sussex County, particularly this area of Sussex County. But as you know, the cottages and courtyards with the coastal style dwellings will be a very unique addition to, as far as multifamily uses. It's not, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's not just another duplex. It's not just another townhouse or apartment building as exists already along the Kings Highway and Gills Neck corridor, but it provides something new and a fresh approach to a multifamily housing option, again, to create an attractive streetscape that exists all along Gills Neck Road. Again, as I've indicated, the developer and the owner of the property has been proud of how Gills Neck has developed the various communities that exist along the Gills Neck Road corridor. While new projects like this naturally raise concerns, particularly from the nearest neighbors, it's important to remember that all of these projects that we're talking about, whether you start over at the canal, Wolf Point, Wolf Run, Hawkseye, Senators, Governors, the Village Center, commercial cottages, that all of these communities and all of these projects, they all arose from the same fields that existed between Kings Highway, Gills Neck Road, and the canal, under the same person, under the same ownership, who has carefully crafted all of this development over time. And as was indicated in the Planning Commission's recommendation, along Gills Neck Road, this is the last piece. This is the last piece of infill between those, and this is an appropriate transition from the commercial right along Kings Highway into the other housing options that exist along Gills Neck Road. The applicant would request that the County Council adopt the recommendations from the Planning Commission. I did want to note, and one of them Mr. Schaefer already hit on, so I won't belabor that one again. I was going to highlight two of the conditions and then suggest two changes. The two conditions that I was going to highlight, one was the one we talked about regarding interconnectivity earlier, Mr. Schaefer. The second is Condition O, which has specific language related to Chapter 89 and the Source Water Protection Act. Again, it was raised by Mr. Schaefer, but I was not here speaking at that moment. And with respect to Mr. Schaefer, your recollection, I actually think that the gentleman's agreement was not so much a gentleman's agreement, but I think that council actually imposed actual conditions related to the relationship between the Board of Public Works and the Mitchell's Corner development. And sort of in anticipation of that and recognizing that this property falls within that same part of the same wellhead protection areas you can see on the screens, we were frankly, probably much more proactive on this application and met with Mr. Medlars and had the discussion. There's an email exchange that exists in the project book materials. And Condition O has the two specific conditions that Mr. Medlars requested regarding this area. Both of them are a little more technical than I am, but on those items. So hopefully that addresses your concern. Both Mr. Mumford and Mr. Lardner met with the Board of Public Works as well on this, and so hopefully that addresses that concern.
Well, I was aware that was in here. I was just, so I wasn't going to ask that question. I was just had some concern to make sure that we did appropriate buffering, because after this process is through and leaves this dais, then we're and I trust staff immensely. We're at the staff's discretion at that point on what is or is not approved as far as buffering and landscaping. So,
Certainly, and with respect to the wellhead protection area, if the conditions that Commission recommended were approved, Mr. Whitehouse's staff would be looking to make sure those conditions are specific, that language is supposed to be specifically on all site plans, in any restrictive covenants, those types of things. In his office, that's part of their routine work that they do on a site plan review. With respect to the two changes to the conditions, and I didn't prepare a special piece of paper, Mr. Moore, as I sometimes do, because they're very simple. With respect to the Planning Commission's recommendation on conditional use 2359, in reason number 4, the very last sentence says this conditional use at approximately 6 units per acre is consistent with other zoning and multifamily developments in the area. As you've heard through the presentation, it's actually 3.99 units to the acre. So I don't think that changes the meaning, as they were content at 6 units to the acre, but it actually is 3.99 units to the acre. So for the council's reasoning to be a little more accurate, that number could be modified. The other change that the developer would request is in 9C, which Section 9 is the conditions that the Planning Commission recommended, and specifically C relates to the amenities, and the second line says including a pool with at least 10,000 square feet of surface area. That would be a ginormous pool, like a water park size pool. What was intended and what was recommended was a 1,000 square foot surface area. So we would request that that be reduced from 10,000 square feet to 1,000 square feet. Other than those minor adjustments, the applicant would ask that council adopt those strong recommendations of the Planning Commission. That concludes our presentation. Myself and any of the other members of the team are certainly available to answer any questions that council may have.
Any questions of council? Any questions of council? Apparently not. Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Okay. Is there anyone else here to